Chapter 1: The Dinner Table Trials. The mahogany dining table claimed to beneath the chandelier, polished so thoroughly that Clare could see her reflection staring back at her. Between the serving dishes, her mother insisted the table always looked like this: pristine, immaculate, worthy of the Mortons. Her father sat at the head, posture straight, napkin folded precisely, a process that his mere presence commanded the role, as if the walls bent inward to hear him speak to his to right. Elizabeth, the eldest, the heir apparent, with her sharp blazer, still on from work at the law firm, to his left. Michael, the youngest here, damp from the hospital scrub sink, his white coat folded neatly over the back of his chair. And then there was Clare, the middle child, the odd one, the disappointment. She sat opposite her mother, who was pouring wine into delicate crystal glasses. The aroma of roast chicken, rosemary, and garlic filled the air. But the food was never the real meal here. Dinner in the Martin household was a courtroom and a surgical theater all at once. Everyone was expected to perform to justify their existence, to prove they were worthy of the family name. Her father cleared his throat, spearing a piece of chicken with surgical precision. "So Elizabeth's," he began, his voice the kind that filled lecture halls. "Tell us about your case." The Judge Morrison ruled today. Elizabeth's lips curved in a smile. Smooth and effortless. She loved being the first witness called. "Yes, he did. He ruled in my client's favor. The company won't have to pay a dime in damages. 12 million saved." A ripple of approval spread around the table. Her mother clapped her hands softly. "Brilliant, darling. Absolutely brilliant. I'm sure your firm was ecstatic." "Of course they were," Elizabeth replied, tucking a strand of glossy hair behind her ear. Her father raised his glass to Elizabeth, carrying on the tradition with excellence. They toasted, glasses clinked, wine glowed ruby under the chandelier from there, and lifted her glass, too. Though the toast wasn't for her. It never was. Her father turned his gaze to Michael, the corners of his mouth twitching upward. "And you, son, how goes residency?" Michael practically beamed. "We had a cardiac emergency today." "Bypass surgery?" "I got to assist 6 hours in the OR, but it felt like 6 minutes. I swear I learned more in one shift than in half of med school." Her mother pressed a hand to her chest. "My boy. Saving lives already?" Her father's pride was palpable, his voice rich. "That's my son, Aiden Martin. Through and through." Clare's knife trembled slightly against her plate. She forced herself to study it, waiting for the inevitable shift of ice. And there it was. Her mother dabbed her lips with her napkin, then glanced across the table. "And you, Clare, what's new in business?" The way she said the word business made it sound like garbage collecting. Clare inhaled slowly. She had news. Big news. Maybe this time. Maybe tonight, they'll finally. "I started Goldman Sachs this summer," she said, keeping her tone even professional. "They only took 12 interns nationwide, and I." "Oh. That's nice." Her mother interrupted, already reaching for the salad. "So, more filing paperwork?" Then her father chuckled. "Glorified secretarial work." Elizabeth smirked over her wine. Michael ducked, his head, smothering a laugh. Clare's throat burned. She wanted to shout that Goldman Sachs was the pinnacle, that people would kill for, the opportunity, that she had outworked hundreds of candidates to get here. But her words caught, strangled by years of practice. The knowledge that speaking up would only invite sharper blades. So she pressed her fork into the chicken, forcing the bite down past the lump in her throat. Her father launched into a story about one of his patients. Elizabeth countered with a legal anecdote. Michael described another rotation. Laughter. Applause. Pride. It flowed easily between them. A current that carried everyone but her by desert. No one even remembered Clare had spoken at all. as she cleared her plate into the sink. Later, she caught her reflection in the dark window above the counter. Her face looked pale under the kitchen light, her eyes hollow, invisible, and somewhere deep inside. A small voice whispered to Abel. See Chapter 2. Ivy League Outsider. The train to New Haven always smelled faintly of coffee and metal, a mix of commuters and students logging suitcases stuffed with books and ambition. Claire pressed her forehead to the glass as the Connecticut countryside blurred past her acceptance letter, folded neatly in her backpack. Yale. She'd done it. She still remembered the day the letter arrived, a thick envelope, not the dreaded thin one. She had run up the steps 2 at a time, breathless, shouting for her parents. For one glowing moment she thought this would be it. The time they would finally beam with pride. But her mother only glanced up from her legal brief. Yale has a business program. Her father, sipping coffee, muttered. At least it isn't a state school. Elizabeth rolled her eyes. Business is the cop-out. Major Toohey and Michael, still in high school, had smirked. I guess they'll let anyone in. That day she lost hold. Body heat replaced with something harder. Still, Yale was a dream on campus. Claire felt both terrified and alive. Lecture halls and buzzed with debate students from around the world dissecting case studies, strategies, and market trends. She thrived on the competition. The energy professor noticed her praise to her insight. For once, she wasn't invisible, but every holiday. When she returned home, she carried her pride like fragile glass and her family shattered it with ease. Thanksgiving break. The Martins' dining room smelled of roast turkey and sage stuffing. Relatives crowded around, voices overlapping in cheerful chaos. Claire had barely set her suitcase down before her and clasped her hands. So business-schooled. That must be exciting, Claire smiled. Yes, it's incredible. I'm learning. Her mother's voice cut across the room, loud enough for everyone to hear. She insists on treating it like law school. Spends all her time with books. Really? What is there to learn? Buy low. Sell high. Laughter erupted around the table. Even her father chuckled, carving into the turkey. Claire's cheeks flamed. She stabbed at her cranberry sauce, willing herself not to cry. Elizabeth leaned in stage, whispering, Don't take it personally. Not everyone can handle the real work. The real work has it. Dissecting companies, navigating complex markets, and balancing financial models was child's play. Winter break. Snow dusted the Martins' neighborhood. When Claire came home in December, she had just finished a grueling round of exams, earning top marks. A professor had even pulled her aside, telling her she had the instincts help a seagull. But that evening, around the fire, her father asked, So, any progress towards medical school? Claire blinked. Medical school? Dad, I'm studying finance. Yes. But surely you'll tire of that. Numbers are so soulless. Medicine would give your life meaning. Her mother sipped her wine. Or law. You would make a fine paralegal. Maybe Elizabeth can get you an interview. Elizabeth smirked over the rim of her glass. Claire felt the similar squeeze in her chest, the urge to shout. I don't want your path. I don't need it. Instead, she bit her tongue until she tasted iron. Spring semester. Back at Yale, she soared. Group projects tend to her leadership. Professors began recommending her for internships. She was invited to exclusive The Nexus, where investment bankers scouted talent. For the first time in her life, she began to believe she was more than the shadow of Elizabeth's son, Michael. She could carve her own name, but when she called home to share the news that she had secured a coveted summer internship, her mother's voice was dismissed. It Well, internships are just busy work. Elizabeth had a large chip that actually mattered. Her father chimed in. Michael is shadowing surgeons this summer. Real doctors saving lives. Not in whatever it is that you're doing. Her grip tightened around the phone. She ended the call quickly, muttering excuses about homework. She sat on her dorm bed afterward, staring at the walls plastered with case studies and business models. Tears hot in her eyes. She had climbed into the Ivy League, clawed her way to the top of her class, and still in her family's eyes. She was nothing. That night, she whispered a promise into the dark. What to do? Actually, I will be so successful. I'll put your own words. And for the first time, the promise felt less like hope and more like prophecy. 3. The verdict. The Martin family didn't gather. They convened. Claire knew something was wrong. The moment she stepped into the living room that evening, the fire was lit in the stone house, but the room felt cold. Her father sat at the head of the long sofa, like a judge presiding over a trial. His fingers stapled. Her mother perched beside him, the legal pad balanced on her lap, as though this too were a case to argue. Elizabeth lounged in an armchair, sharp in a tailored suit. Even at home. Michael leaned against the mantel, his white coat draped over a chair, stethoscope poking from the pocket as if it were part of his identity. Claire lowered herself into the last empty seat and leather chair, angled just slightly away from the circle. An afterthought. Her mother cleared her throat. Thank you for being here tonight. We have something important to discuss as a family. Claire. Stomach tightened. A family meeting. Those words had weight. It wasn't about holidays or birthdays. It was about legacy, inheritance. The kind of decisions that would echo for decades. Her father's voice cut across the room, measured and called. We have been reviewing our estate planning. Our goal has always been to ensure that the Martin legacy is preserved in law, in medicine, in the professions that matter. Claire's pulse quickened. She had a sudden and irrational hope. Maybe they were finally recognizing her. Finally offering her a place at the table as an equal. Then her father continued. Elizabeth and Michael have proven themselves. They have embraced their responsibilities. But you. His gaze landed on her, sharp as a scalpel. You chose a different path. Claire swallowed hard. I went to Yale, Yes. For business. Her mother interjected, voice flat. An Ivy League name doesn't change the fact that you turned your back on tradition. Business is not a legacy. Business is opportunism. Elizabeth crossed her legs, a smirk tugging at her mouth. Michael shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Her father leaned forward. We have decided it's only fair to adjust the inheritance. Elizabeth and Michael will receive everything. You, Claire, will not. Silence. The words seemed to hang in the air. Heavy and final. Claire's chest constricted. She felt as though the room itself had tilted, throwing her off balance. You were disinherited. Me? Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. It's not punishment, her mother said, though her tone was icy. It's recognition. You chose not to be part of our legacy. Therefore, you will not benefit from it. Elizabeth's eye flicked to her smug triumph, barely hidden. Michael avoided her gaze entirely, staring down at his shoes. Claire's nails dug crescents into her palms. 1,000 responses screamed in her throat, anger, pleading accusations, but none escaped. Instead, she stood. Her voice, when it came, was calm. Dead calm. Got it. Her father frowned. Claire, don't be dramatic. But she was already walking to the door. No shouting, no tears. Just 2 words and the sharp echo of her heels against the hardwood as she left the house. The night air hit her face like ice as she stepped outside the Martins' Grand home loomed behind her, its lights glowing against the darkness like a fortress she would never enter again. She walked to her car, each step steadier than the last. By the time she turned the ignition, she wasn't shaking anymore. She was burning. And somewhere deep inside, a veil crystallized. "Oh, you'll create this world for you." Chapter 4: Baptism by Fire at Goldman. The offices of Goldman Sachs were less like a workplace and more like a gladiator arena. Glass towers gleamed over Wall Street. Polished marble floors reflected fluorescent lights. And everywhere Clare looked, young analysts in fitted suits sprinted as though chased by walls. And in a way, they were. The wolves had names. Earnings. Billion-dollar clients. Partners with appetites that could never be satisfied. Clare's first day began at 6 a.m. and didn't end until well past midnight when she finally stumbled into her shoebox apartment. Heels in her hand, she collapsed, face first onto the mattress without even changing her clothes. This was life. Now. The pressure cooker. The analysts were a small army, overeducated, underslept, fueled by caffeine and fear. They competed not just with other firms, but with each other. Success wasn't measured by competence. It was measured by who lasted longer without blinking. You learn fast. Her manager, a man named Connors, had told her. Or Bill Washout. Most do. Every morning, Clare dragged herself to her desk before sunrise, spreadsheet glowing on her screen, eyes burning. She worked 12, 16, 18 hours. Financial models stacked on financial models until numbers blurred into abstractions. Her peers whispered off the call. Analysts who couldn't keep up vanished overnight. Badges deactivated. Desks cleared. Clare refused to be one of them. When exhaustion clouded her, she remembered her father's smirk and glorified secretary when her vision swamped from staring at screens. She remembered her mother's dismissive tone. Business isn't the legacy. When her chest ached with loneliness, she remembered Elizabeth's smug smile and she kept going. Rival. It didn't take long for Clare to attract competition. One rival in particular, Andrew Pierce, with a prep school arrogance that filled the room. He came from a family of bankers, the kind who had been shaping Wall Street. Before Clare was even born. "Careful, Martin," he told her one night, smirking across their shared conference table at 2 a.m. "This place eats people like you alive." Clare met his gaze. "Then it will show up and make the rivalry become legendary." If Clare stayed until midnight, Andrew stayed until 2. If she nailed a pitch, he added a flourish to outshine her partner. She began to notice the silent duo quietly amused by their competition. Clare wasn't playing for their amusement. She was fighting for survival. Breaking point. The collapse came in February. She had been working 90-hour weeks, surviving on bad coffee and vending machine snacks. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror was hallowed. I gray-skinned at 4 a.m. while building a financial model for a pharmaceutical client. Her body gave out. Her head hit the desk. Darkness swallowed her. She woke up in the air. An ivy in her arm. A nurse suffering exhaustion. The doctor said gently, "Your body shut down. You can't keep this pace." But Clare only heard her father's voice in her head, dripping disdain. "At least it isn't state school." She pulled the IV out herself, ignoring the nurse's protests. By noon, she was back at her desk. Andrew smirked when she walked in. "Back from the dead, Martin." She didn't answer. She opened her laptop and got to work the first when her breakthrough came in April. A client, a multinational shipping company, faced a potential collapse due to skyrocketing fuel costs. Teams scrambled. Partners barked. Analysts drowned in data. Clare saw something no one else did. A hedge buried deep in the company's contracts that could offset the losses. She stayed 40 hours straight, piecing it together, presenting it to Connor with trembling hands. By the end of the week, Goldman had not only saved the client, but made millions in the process. Connors called her into his office. That was sharp work, Martin. Impressive. It was the first genuine praise she had heard in years. She walked out of his office, past Andrew's furious glare. Heart-pounding was something she hadn't felt in forever. Not hope. Not joy with validation. Hardening the months that followed honed her into steel. Sleep became optional. Failure became fuel. She learned to read people like spreadsheets, predicting lies, spotting weaknesses, using them. By the end of her first year, she wasn't just surviving Goldman. She was thriving. But she had changed. The girl who once sat silent at the family dinner table was gone. In her place stood someone sharper, colder, hungrier. The Ice Queen of Wall Street was being born, and her family had no idea. Chapter 5: The First Startup. By the end of her second year at Goldman, Clare had mastered the grind. 90-hour weeks no longer broke her. They sharpened her. She could build models in her sleep, anticipate partner demands before they opened their mouths, and slice through Andrew Pierce's smugness with a single, well-timed remark. But the victories felt hollow. She was making millions for people who would never know her name. Her parents still dismissed her career as trivial. Every success was swallowed whole by the machine. And then came Ryan Whitaker. On the pitch. She met him at a network mixer, one of those rooftop events where investors and dreamers mingle over overpriced cocktails. Ryan was magnetic, tasseled blonde hair, a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos and then ease in conversation. The Clare ended. "You're Clare Martin, right?" "Goldman. Word is that you are one of the sharpest analysts in the building." Clare arched an eyebrow. "Word travels fast. I pay attention." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, I'm starting a fintech company platform to democratize international money transfers. Cut out the middleman. Slush fees give people back control." He outlined his idea with energy that lit the night. Blockchain infrastructure, regulatory loopholes, aggressive scaling. It was risky, wrong, and brilliant. And for the first time in years, Clare felt her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from possibility. "I need someone like you," Ryan said. Numbers. Strategy. Credibility. You would be co-founder. Equal partner. She studied him at Goldman. She was a colleague here. She could be the engine. "I'll think about it," she said coolly. But she already knew her answer. Leap of faith. Walking away from Goldman was like tearing out a part of herself. Connors called her into his office, disappointment etched into his features. "You could make partner one day," he told her. "Or I could build something that's mine." She replied. Ryan welcomed her into the startup like a brother. Their office was a converted warehouse with exposed to brick and mismatched furniture, a far cry from Goldman's polished marble. They worked 14-hour days, surviving on takeout and adrenaline. And it was exhilarating. Clare built the financial backbone. Models. Forecast. Risks. Assessments. Ryan charmed investors, painting visions of revolution. Together, they raised $5 million in seed funding. For the first time, Clare felt she wasn't invisible. She wasn't carrying someone else's banner. This was her. The cracks. The first signs were subtle. Arriving late to meetings. Smiling sheepishly. Had drinks with an investor. Expenses began creeping up. Lavish dinners. New suits. Unnecessary travel. When Claire questioned him, he waved that off. You have to spend money to make money. Relax. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. But the numbers didn't lie. It was past midnight when she found it. Claire was cross-checking expenses when a line item caught her eye. A $50,000 transfer to a company she didn't recognize. Then another. And another. Shell Corporation's money quietly bleeding out of their accounts. Her stomach turned to ice. She confronted him the next morning in the office, papers spread across the table like evidence in a trial. You stole from us, she said, voice shaking with fury. Ryan leaned back in his chair, utterly unbothered. Don't be naive, Claire. Everyone schemes. You've embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars. Relax. I built this company. Investors believe in me. You are just a mess behind the curtain. He smirked. And don't forget who's replaceable. The words sliced her open for a moment. She was back at her parents' dinner table, invisible again. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steel. You'll regret this. Collapse. The fallout was swift. Investors pulled funding. Lawsuits loomed. The press ran headlines about a toxic fintech implosion. Ryan disappeared into another venture unscathed. And Claire, she was left penniless. Her credit cards maxed out. Apartment rent overdue, savings gone. For weeks, she lived on instant noodles and tap water. Humiliation. Gnawing at her ribs. Her parents didn't call. Of course they didn't. At night, lying awake on her futon, she replaced Ryan's smirk. Her father scoffed. Her mother's dismissal. The chorus of every boy that had ever doubted her. But beneath the humiliation, something darker stirred resolve. She would never be underestimated again. Not by Ryan, not by Goldman. Not by her family. The next time she built something, it would not collapse. The next time, she would burn the world. If she had to. Chapter 6: The Betrayal. The summons arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. A thick envelope slid under her apartment door. Its weight heavier than stone. Claire tore it open with trembling hands, and there it was in blank ink. Whitaker. Lizzie. Martin. Her stomach dropped. Ryan wasn't just gone. He was suing her. The courtroom smelled faintly of dust and would polish the air thick with tension. Claire sat at the defendant's table, her suit second-hand tailor as best as she could afford. Across the aisle. Ryan leaned casually in his chair, flanked by a team of high-priced lawyers in custom suits. He looked like he was enjoying himself. The judge's gavel rapped. The case began. Ryan's lawyers painted Clare as incompetent, negligent, a liability who had driven the company into the ground. They spoke of mismanagement, of reckless decision-making. Each word was a dagger. Twisting deeper. Claire clenched her jaw. Her own lawyer. A kind of poor, overworked public attorney doing his best to defend her. But against Ryan's arsenal. It was like bringing a butter knife to a gunfight. When Ryan took the stand, he spun his story with practiced charm. She was good with numbers, sure, but she didn't understand leadership. Investors came to me. I kept us afloat as long as I could. She was dead weight. Claire's fists balled beneath the table. She wanted to leap up, scream the truth that he had stolen. He had bled the company dry. But each time her lawyer objected, Ryan's team swatted it down like flies. And the jury listened. The press reporters swarmed the courtroom steps, their cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Claire, did you mismanage company funds? Claire? Do you regret leaving Goldman for this failed venture? Sources say Whitaker accuses you of fraud. Care to comment? Her photos, splashed across financial blogs the next day from Ivy League, took liability. The fall of Clare Martin. She stopped buying newspapers. She stopped checking her phone. The world. So Ryan, as a visionary, betrayed by an unqualified partner. And Clare, she was the cautionary tale. Rock bottom. The last student drained what little money she had left. Rent overdue. Fridge empty. She sold her jewelry, her designer bags, even her laptop, replacing it with a battered second-hand model from a pawn shop. Nights were the worst. Lying on her futon, the city buzzing outside her window, she replayed every choice that had led her here. She remembered her father's sneer. Business is not legacy. Her mother's dismissal. At least you didn't waste tuition completely. Ryan's smirk. You are replaceable. Each memory was acid in her veins, but she refused to break the turning point. It was during one of those sleepless nights that she made her. She sat at the small desk in her apartment, surrounded by unpaid bills. The lawsuit papers piled high, and opened a blank notebook on the first page in sharp black ink. She wrote, "Never again." Never again would she trust blindly. Never again would she be someone's afterthought. Never again would she allow herself to be powerless. She would rebuild. And this time, she would not just succeed. She would dominate. She closed the notebook, Duval carved too deep in her bones. Ryan had betrayed her. Humiliated her, left her for dead. But one day, she would stand above him. Above all of them. And that day came. And when that day came, she would not forgive. Chapter 7. Hardening. The lawsuit ended not with vindication, but with exhaustion. Ryan walked away. Untarnished. His name still glittering in the startup world. Clare walked away. Buried under debt. Reputation scorched. Her name whispered with pity. She had nothing. Her apartment was so bare it echoed. Futon. Thrift store. Desk. A single lamp. The fridge hummed. Emptiness. Every morning she woke to the reminder that she had been gutted by people she trusted. And every night she went to bed with the taste of rage on her tongue. And yet, beneath the wreckage, something inside her was shifting. Learning the new rules. Ryan had beaten her. Not with intelligence. He was a mediocre strategist at best, but with sham connections and ruthless manipulation. Goldman had nearly broken her with inhuman hours and impossible demands. Together, these failures taught her the real rules of the world. One chance matters as much as brains. Investors don't fund numbers. They fund charisma. 2 contracts are weapons. Trust is weakness. Every class must be sharpened like a blade. 3 allies are temporary. Enemies are permanent. Plan accordingly. Clare devoured the books on negotiation, psychology, leadership. She attended cheap seminars and rented hotel ballrooms. Took notes from hustlers and veterans alike. She forced herself into networking events, even when humiliation made her throat close. She learned to smile like she meant it. She learned to listen more than she spoke. She learned to watch for the flicker in someone's eyes that betrayed fear, greed, or arrogance. It was like learning a new language. The unspoken dialect of power. Scraping the button. Money was scarce. She freelanced where she could. Building financial models for small startups. Consulting for founders who barely paid her enough to cover groceries. Sometimes she took jobs she could have once considered beneath her. Copy editing, pitch decks. teaching community college courses, even bartending on weekends when things were dire. Every humiliation became a data point. Every small paycheck became fuel. When she collapsed onto her futon at night, her notebook sat on the desk across the room. The first page, still scrawled with 2 words. Never again. She read them before closing her eyes. Her break came at a dingy co-working space in Brooklyn. A scrappy biotech startup needed financial consulting for an investor. Pitch. Clare agreed. For pennies, just desperate for experience. The founder, a nervous man named Daniel, stammered through slides while investors checked their watches. It was a disaster. Clare couldn't take it. She stood uninvited and began speaking. "Gentlemen," she said evenly. "You're missing the point. This isn't about lab equipment or technical jargon. It's about market demand. In 5 years, these gene therapies will be $1 billion industry. And this company," she gestured toward Daniel, whose eyes widened in shock, "is positioned to lead silence." Then one of the investors leaned forward. "And who are you?" Clare smiled faintly. "I'm the reason you're about to write a check." By the end of the night, Daniel had secured $2 million in seed funding. He paid Clare more than she had asked, with a gratitude that bordered on art. It wasn't just the money. It was proof. Proof that she could command a room. The narrative create value from chaos to building the network. Word spread quietly. Clare Martin, the fixer. The strategist who could see angles. Other missed startups began calling small ones at first, then bigger. She charged more each time. Investors who once ignored her began inviting her to lunch. Probing for insight, her phone buzzed with opportunity. She was no longer invisible, but she wasn't satisfied. Each new contact, each deal, each favor banked. She threatened. She treated them like chess pieces, lining them up, calculating how they might serve. One day, the world had shown her no mercy. She would return the favor. Hardening months bled into years. The humiliation of the courtroom faded, replaced by scar tissue. She didn't laugh easily anymore. She didn't cry. She didn't trust her reflection in the mirror had changed. The wide-eyed girl who once begged for recognition at her parents' dinner table. That girl was gone. In her place was someone sharper, colder, hungrier. Ryan had taught her what betrayal looked like. Goldman had taught her what collapse felt like. Her family had taught her what rejection burnt like. Together, they had built something stronger than love or validation. They had built steel, and steel was ready to cut. Chapter 8: Solstice Energy. The invitation came on heavy cardstock embossed with gold lettering. Board of Directors. Solstice Energy Strategic Finance Consultant Candidate Clare Martin. Clare almost laughed when she read it. After years of scraping together, consulting gigs, working out of coffee shops and dingy co-working spaces, the idea of presenting to $1 billion renewable energy startups board felt surreal. But surreal or not, it was the opportunity she had been waiting for. The boardroom of Solstice Energy was a temple of power. Glass walls overlooking the Manhattan skyline, a table long enough to seat 20, and chairs filled with men who had built empires. Clare walked in with a single leather portfolio, her thrifted suit pressed to perfection. She felt their eyes on her, sizing her up, dismissing her the same way her parents always had. "Miss Martin," the chairman, said, his stoned ordeal. "But cool. We have reviewed your resume. Impressive academic background. Some consulting, but limited leadership experience. Tell us why we should consider you." Clare met his gaze without blinking. "Because you are bleeding money, and no one else in this room has figured out why." A few eyebrows rose. She set her portfolio on the table, flipped it open, and began. You've hedged poorly against fuel price volatility. Your procurement contracts are one-sided, favoring your suppliers, not you and your competitor. Aegis Renewables is sitting on a patent you pulled. You haven't noticed. If they act on it, you'll be obsolete within 18 months. The room might still. The chairman frowned. And you know this. How long? Claire slid a document across the table. Because I read the fine print. No one else bothered with page 17, subsection D of agency's filings. They left a back door wide open. If you move now, you can exploit it before they do. If you don't, you won't exist. In fact, ideas. The silence was electric. Finally, one of the directors leaned back. Eyes gleaming. Gentlemen, I think we have found our consultant. The turning point. Within weeks, Clare was appointed CFO. The move shocked the company's leadership. She was young, untested at that scale. But the board, swayed by her audacity and precision, overruled objections. And Clare went to work. She cut waste ruthlessly. Renegotiated contracts. Restructured debt. She confronted department heads twice her age, staring them down until they folded. When Aegis finally tried to activate their patent loophole, Clare had already positioned Solstice to outmaneuver them. The rival company lost billions. Solstice surged ahead. The company went public the following year. The IPO was explosive. Investors clamoring to buy in Clare's stock options, negotiated with careful foresight, were worth over $400 million overnight recognition. For the first time, her name appeared in the Wall Street Journal. Clare Martin, CFO of Solstice Energy, hailed as an architect of record-breaking IPO. She clipped the article and taped it to her fridge. Not because she needed the validation, but because she wanted the reminder. She had done this alone, without her family, without Ryan, without anyone's approval. When she looked at the article, she didn't see 400 million. She saw every smirk at the dinner table, every sneer from Ryan, every partner at Goldman who assumed she would burn out. She saw proof the Ice Queen. But success came at a cost. Her hours were longer than ever. Her sleep thinner. She missed birthdays, holidays, relationships, friends drifted away. She built walls around herself so high that no one could scale them. Her employees respected her theater. Even. They whispered around her behind closed doors. The Ice Queen of Wall Street. Clare didn't mind being feared. Was better than being ignored. Better Ice Queen than invisible daughter. She wasn't there to be liked. She was there to win. Foreshadow. The night after the IPO, Clare stood alone in her penthouse, glass of champagne in hand. Manhattan glittered beneath her, the hum of the city pulsing like a heartbeat. She thought of her family's house, the polished mahogany table, the dismissive laughter she imagined mailing them, the newspaper articles, her face in the front page. But she didn't. Not yet. She wanted them to come to her. And one day they would. Chapter 9: The Ice Queen. The press called her lucky. Investors called her sharp. Her employees called her terrifying. But behind closed doors, boardrooms whispered a new name. The Ice Queen of Wall Street, a reputation born in fire. Clare didn't set out to earn the moniker. But once Solstice Energy went public, she realized the truth. Success only bought her a bigger battlefield. Other executives resented her rise. They questioned her use, her gender, her audacity. Competitors sniffed for weakness. Assuming her IPO was a fluke. She proved them wrong. One brutal negotiation at a time. The first takeover. It started with a small tech firm, Helix Dynamics, whose patents were critical to Solstice growth. The CEO, a man twice Clare's age, swaggered into the conference room. Certain he could bully hell, certain he could bully her into overpaying. You are ambitious, Miss Martin, he said, leaning back in his chair. But this is a man's game. You don't know how brutal it can get. Claire slid a folder across the table. Page 12 of your filings. Debt covenants. You're 6 weeks from default. Without me, you'll be bankrupt by the end of the quarter. The CEO's smirk faltered. You can sell now, she continued calmly. I'll buy your assets out of liquidation for pennies. Your choice. He signed the papers the next morning. Fear has currency. Word spread quickly. Clare Martin didn't block. She didn't bend. She saw weakness. Others missed and wielded them like a scalpel. Competitors began to dread facing her. Investors began to revere her. At Solstice, junior analysts whispered warnings to new hires. Don't miss deadlines. Don't hand her sloppy work. She'll get this straight to you. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. A single arched eyebrow, a single sentence laced with quiet steel, was enough to reduce grown men to stammering. And oddly, she preferred it that way. Fear was clean. Respect and through intimidation never wavered. Enemies in high places, of course. Her rise made enemies. Andrew Pierce, her old Goldman rival, resurfaced. Now at a competing firm, he tried to undermine her in a joint venture. He leaked rumors to the press, painted her as a reckless, too aggressive. Claire didn't retaliate with words. She retaliated with precision. Within 6 months, Andrew's firm lost 3 major contracts that Claire had quietly redirected to Solstice at an industry gala. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Andrew's face was pale, his confidence gone. Claire raised her champagne glass to him, the faintest smile on her lips. The Ice Queen did not forget the loneliness of power. But power came at a cost. Her phone no longer buzzed with friends, inviting her out. Her calendar was filled with meetings, not birthdays. Men she dated briefly faded away, unable to keep up with her hours. Her intensity. Her unwillingness to soften. Sometimes late at night. In her penthouse she stood by the window with the city sprawled beneath her and wondered, was she building an empire or a fortress? She never lingered on the question long. Vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford. The turning point. One evening, during a particularly brutal negotiation with an oil consortium, a senior executive slammed his hand on the table. You're cold, Martin. Ice in your veins. You care about numbers, not people. Claire met his fury with calm indifference. You're right. People lie. Numbers do not. The room went silent. And just like that, her nickname was born. Owning the title. At first she hated it. The Ice Queen. It sounded cruel, unnatural. But over time, she realized the truth. It was armor. No one underestimated the Ice Queen. No one dismissed her as invisible. No one dared laugh at her table. Her name spread through Wall Street. Whispered with fear, with grudging respect. With all. And for the first time in her life, Clare Martin was not just seen. She was undeniable. Chapter 10: The Private Life. On paper, Clare Martin had it all. A penthouse overlooking the Hudson. A fleet of luxury cars. She rarely drove. And that portfolio was slower than most small countries. But behind the glass of her apartment, the silence was deafening. The empty calendar. Her assistants kept her calendar immaculate. Every meeting, every call, every flight organized down to the minute. But between 7 a.m. and midnight, there were no entries marked. Birthdays passed unnoticed. Holidays were optional. New Year's Eve was spent reviewing contracts. She remembered one Christmas morning when she finally closed her laptop at 5 a.m. and realized the only decoration in her apartment was the faint reflection of the city's holiday lights in her window. For a moment, she had felt like a ghost haunting her own life. A love almost found. There was one. His name was Marcus. A fellow consultant she met during the Solstice negotiations. Unlike the others, he didn't flinch at her intensity. He admired. They fell into late-night conversations over whiskey trading, war stories from boardrooms, laughing in a way that felt dangerously close to ease. For the first time in years, Claire let someone in. But Marcus wanted more than deals and deadlines. He wanted dinners that weren't cancelled last-minute weekends away without her phone buzzing every 10 minutes. He wanted a partner, not a fortress. One night after she left and waiting at a restaurant for 2 hours while she closed another deal, he sent her a message that ended it. "You're brilliant, Claire, but there's no room in your life for anyone else. Not even me." She never responded. She buried herself in work instead, convincing herself she didn't need him or anyone. But sometimes when she passed that restaurant on 52nd Street, she thought of him waiting at the table, candlelight flickering on an untouched glass of wine. Friends who drifted. College friends stopped calling. One by one, they married, had children, moved to suburbs. At first, she made excuses. Next time. After this quarter. Once the deal closes. Eventually, the calls stopped altogether. She saw their lives played out on social media, birthday parties, barbecues, smiling children and Halloween costumes. Claire scrolled past the photos quickly, telling herself she didn't care. But sometimes late at night, she lingered just a little too long before closing the app. Family in the rearview. Her own family remained absent, of course. She hadn't spoken to her parents in years. Elizabeth and Michael never reached out. And she didn't either. Yet in quiet moments, she wondered if they ever thought of her. Did her mother ever hesitate over her phone considering a call? Did her father ever regret that night in the living room when he declared her disinherited? The silence from them was an answer in itself. The price of power. The city knew her as the Ice Queen. Ruthless. Untouchable. Brilliant. And it was true in boardrooms. She was steel, but alone in her penthouse. Glass of wine in hand. Staring at the glittering skyline. She sometimes asked herself the question she couldn't face in daylight. Was it worth it? Her empire had come at a cost. Love lost. Friendships abandoned. Family severed power. What's intoxicating? Yes. Respect was everything she had craved as a girl. Ignored at the dinner table. But respect couldn't warm an empty bed. Every night before bed, she opened her old notebook, the same one she had written in after Ryan's betrayal on the first page. The vow stared back at her. Never again. She traced the letters with her fingertip, as though reminding herself who she was. Then she closed it, turned off the light, and let the series glow. Keep her company in the dark. Chapter 11: The Fall of Giants. The Martins had built their lives like monuments. Sprawling house, gaming cars, vacations to Europe. Fine wines stocked in the cellar. To outsiders, they were untouchable. The perfect doctor, lawyer. Dynasty. But monuments cracked and theirs began to crumble slowly. Then all at once. The father's fall. Dr. Richard Martin had once been the star of his hospital. His name carried weight. Patients requested him by reputation alone, but prestige blinded him when colleagues warned against his side ventures. He dismissed them. Medicine is steady, but money is made in risk. He invested in commercial real estate, glossy brochures promising sky-high returns. He sunk millions into condos that were never built, retail spaces that stood empty. Then the market turned. Tenants vanished. Developers fled. The numbers stopped adding up. Richard doubled down. Convinced that he could save it, he leveraged his retirement. Drained savings. Signed the guarantees he barely read. By the time he realized he was cornered, it was too late. The surgeon who once commanded operating rooms now sat hunched at his desk at night, surrounded by overdue notices. Hands shaking as he held them, the same hands that had once saved lives. The mother's pride. Margaret and Martin, once the sharp-tongued attorney who strutted through courtrooms, discovered too late how fragile her throne was. Her firm downsized. New blood came in. Younger. Hungrier. Cheaper. She told herself she was indispensable, that her name carried more weight than billable hours. It didn't. One day, she walked into her office to find her nameplate gone. The managing partners had replaced her with someone half her age. Someone who understood the new clients better. The law degree that had been her shield against irrelevance felt suddenly like paper. She kept up appearances at first charity luncheons, garden club meetings, but whispers followed her. People noticed when she stopped wearing designer dresses. When she canceled vacations, they noticed when the house, always perfectly manicured, began to show weeds pride. She realized how to smell the faint odor of desperation hidden under expensive perfume. Elizabeth's facade. Elizabeth, the golden daughter, had married into money. Or so she thought. Her husband, a corporate lawyer, promised stability and comfort, but the marriage was built on appearance, not trust. When her husband's firm hit trouble, their finances for mortgage payments loomed. Credit cards bled. Her marriage dissolved into shouting matches and icy silences. She looked in the mirror and saw lines forming at the corners of her eyes. The faint wear of stress. The girl, who had once sneered at Claire's degree, now saw her kitchen table late at night doing math. She couldn't make work. Michael's burdens. Michael, the youngest, was drowning 3 children in private school. A mortgage on a house far too large. Student loans. Still snarling at his ankles. He worked endless shifts at the hospital. Exhaustion carved into his face. His patients loved him, but his paycheck never stretched far enough. He ended his father's confidence, his sister's charm. But neither could pay tuition or keep the lights on. He thought sometimes about calling Claire, about asking if she would forgive him. But shame, she sealed his lips. The silence between them. The Martins gathered less frequently now. Family dinners. Once performances of success became strained, affairs of a spoken became strained. Affairs of unspoken debt. Richard stared into his wine glass. Margaret picked at her food. Elizabeth avoided questions. Michael barely spoke, his phone buzzing with reminders of bills unpaid, and no one mentioned Clare. Not yet. But she lingered like a ghost at the table. The daughter they had cut out, the sister they had dismissed, the one they had declared unworthy. And in the quietest moments, when pride cracked and the weight of failure pressed too hard, they all thought the same. Forbidden thought. We need her. Chapter 12. The email. The email arrived in Claire's inbox at 2:17 a.m. She was awake, of course. She was always awake at that hour, staring at spreadsheets or reviewing contracts. In the quiet stillness of her penthouse, the city humming faintly beneath her. Her inbox was usually a flood of opportunities: mergers, acquisitions, invitations to summits in Zurich or Dubai. The subject line froze her hand on the trackpad from Elizabeth Martin. Subject. We need to talk. Claire's first reaction was laughter, bitter sharp, echoing in the silence of her apartment. We need to talk. As if the last decade hadn't existed. As if they hadn't thrown her out of the family like trash. She hovered her cursor over delete. But something, curiosity, maybe worse. Bite made her click. The message was short. Claire. I know it's been years. I know things weren't good between us, but we need you. Please, Elizabeth. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just, please. Claire closed the laptop with a snap. Her pulse hammering. She should have deleted it. Blocked the sender. Gone back to work. But she did it. The pie. 2 days later, she hired a private investigator. If the Martins wanted her attention, she wanted the truth first. The report landed on her desk in a plain manila folder. Claire poured a glass of wine, sat by the window overlooking Manhattan, and read her father's investments had imploded. Half-finished condos, retail spaces without tenants. He had leveraged his savings, even his pension. Predators circled like vultures. Her mother had lost her partnership, reduced to occasional freelance consulting. Pride kept her from admitting that she was effectively unemployed. Elizabeth's marriage had cracked wide open under the weight of debt. Divorce filings were in progress. Michael was barely keeping his head above water, working himself to exhaustion while bills piled up. Private school tuition. Mortgage payments. Loans. He was drowning. The Martins, once untouchable, were in freefall. Claire set the folder down slowly, her hands steady though her heart thundered. So it was true, the empire had crumbled. The debate. She paced her apartment, the city clearing below. Part of her wanted to fly across the country and throw the report in their faces. So now you need me. Now you remember. I exist. Another part wanted to ignore them forever. Let them choke on the consequences of their arrogance. But a darker part. The part that remembered every smirk, every dismissal. Every night at the dinner table. Savored this moment for the first time. The Martins needed her, and she was no longer the invisible daughter. The call? Her phone buzzed. Later that week, unknown number. She almost ignored it until instinct told her to answer. Claire. The voice was raw, trembling. Her mother. Who gave you this number? Claire asked flatly. Please. Her mother whispered. Which? We need help. Your father. We are losing everything. Claire's silence stretched. She could hear her mother's shaky breath on the other end. The sound of someone who had never begged before and hated the taste of it. Finally, Claire said softly. You disinherited me, remember? I know we were wrong. Claire tossed the phone onto the sofa. She poured herself another glass of wine and stood at the window, watching the city burn with light. Her family had finally reached for her, and she had slammed the door, but she knew they wouldn't stop. Not yet. Chapter 13. The Café Confrontation. The cafe was small, tucked into a quiet street near Central Park, a place where the powerful liked to pretend they were ordinary. Exposed brick walls, the faint hum of jazz from hidden speakers, baristas moving with the quiet efficiency of those used to discretion. Claire arrived 10 minutes early. She always arrived early. She chose a table in the corner, her back to the wall where she could see the door. Her coffee sat untouched. Steam curling into the cool air. When the door finally opened, her family stepped in. She almost didn't recognize them. Her father, once so commanding, moved with a stoop in his shoulders, as though the weight of debt physically bent him. His tailored suit hung looser than it once had, the shine gone from his shoes. Her mother's elegance was cracked. Her hair was still styled, her makeup still applied, but the gloss was gone. Her confidence dimmed. She looked like a woman trying desperately to all the pieces together. Elizabeth wore perfection like armor. But Claire saw the cracks, the faint lines of exhaustion, the way her smile didn't reach her eyes. Michael looked the worst. Dark circles, unshaven jaw. the slump of a man who had worked too many night shifts. They spotted her at once for a heartbeat. None of them moved. Then her mother approached, the voice trembling. "Clare." Clare gestured to the empty chairs. "Sit the place they sat." The silence was heavy, broken only by the hiss of the espresso machine. Finally, her father cleared his throat, the sound dry and strained. "Thank you for meeting us." "Get to the point." Her mother leaned forward, hands clasped. "We're in trouble. Your father's investments. They didn't work out. My firm." Her voice cracked. "We're losing everything." "And your siblings?" "They're struggling too." Elizabeth swallowed hard. "We know things weren't perfect between us. But you're successful now. We need your help." Clare laughed. Sharp, cold. A few customers glanced their way. "Family? That's what you're calling this? You told me I wasn't family. You cut me out. Do you remember that night?" "Because I do." Her father shifted uncomfortably. "We made mistakes where we thought we were doing what was best." "What was best for you?" Clare snapped. "Tradition. Legacy. That's all you cared about. And when I didn't fit your mold, you disinherited me. Like I was a bad investment." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't realize." "No," Clare said, her voice low, deadly calm. "You realized you just didn't care." Cracks in the armor. Michael finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Clare, I envy you. I always have. Medicine wasn't my choice. It was Dad's. I wanted to quit, but I was too scared. You had the courage. I didn't." For a moment, Clare's heart stuttered. She saw not the golden boy, but a brother trapped in the same machine. Elizabeth's facade broke next. "I resented you," she admitted. Voice tight. "Because you left. Because you refused to play the part. And deep down I wanted to do the same, but I couldn't." The confessions hung heavy in the air. But Clare's fury was not so easily soothed. The refusal. "You want my help now?" she said softly. "After all of this, after the years you laughed at me, dismissed me, cut me off. You didn't care if I starved. And now that you're drowning, suddenly I matter." Her father tried one last time. "Clare, you're still our daughter. Blood is blood. You can't turn your back on us." She leaned forward, her eyes like steel. "You turned your back on me first, and let me be very clear. I will not give you money. Not 1 cent. I built this life without you. And you will live without me." Clare stood up, smoothing her coat. The cafe seemed to hold its breath. "You want a tradition? Legacy. Perfection. You disinherited me. Fine. Now I disinherit you." She turned and walked out, heels striking against the tile like a gavel. Behind her, silence. For the first time in their lives, the Martins had no verdict to deliver. Chapter 14: The Hallowed Holidays. The first invitation came as a text from Elizabeth the week before Thanksgiving. No subject line, no grand overture. Just a photo of a grocery list written on a torn envelope with the words, "We're doing dinner at Mom and Dad's 4 p.m. If you want to come." She stared at it for a long time in the photo's corner. She could see a cheap ballpoint pen. The kind you grabbed in a hurry from a bank counter. There were lines through items: turkey, stuffing mix, canned cranberry. Nothing artisanal. Nothing catered for 10 minutes. She did nothing for 11. She considered deleting it at 12. She typed. I'll bring a pie. 4 p.m. She added one more sentence. We don't talk about money. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Appeared again. Understood. Elizabeth wrote. Thank you. Thanksgiving. The house was smaller, not the monolithic place of Polish to wood and gallery lighting, but a modest rental with white vinyl siding and a narrow porch that dipped slightly when you stepped on it. A for lease sign still lay face down in the bushes by the front door. Forgotten or ignored, Claire stood at the threshold, balancing a bakery box and that paper sack of coffee beans, feeling ridiculous in a wool coat that suddenly looked too expensive for the doormat. She knocked her mother open the door and went very still. She wore a sweater Claire had never seen threadbare. At one cuffs. Sleeves a little long. Her makeup was careful, but there was a tremor in the smile that followed Claire. She said something, Claire. She said softly. You came. I said I would. Her mother stepped aside. The house smelled like turkey and something sweet around the edges, like cinnamon and effort. The dining room held a table that wasn't really a dining table at all. Just 2 smaller tables pushed together and covered with a plaid cloth that didn't quite reach both ends. The chairs didn't match. Michael was there. Sleeves rolled up, trying to coax him mashed potatoes out of a battered steel pot. And his 3 children pinned bolt through the room and then halted when they saw Claire, as if someone had pressed pass. The oldest, a girl with the same sharp eyebrows Claire saw in the mirror, lifted a cautious hand. Hi. Claire. Hi. Claire said the word catching, then smoothing. I brought pie. Elizabeth appeared from the kitchen with a pan of rolls, and they too bright smile. Her eyes were tired. Perfect timing. They ate. It was awkward. It was also peaceful in ways that surprised her. Conversation stumbled, then found a small foothold. Michael's new rotation. Elizabeth's divorce papers. How amicable, she said. Which meant it wasn't the kids' school projects. No one said portfolio arrears, predator loan. At one point, the youngest child, a boy still clumsy with his fork, looked at Claire and asked, Do you own the whole city? The table went silent. Claire set her knife down, startled by the small, earnest face, studying her like she might say yes. No, she said. Just a few pieces of it. You like Monopoly? He decided, satisfied, and scooped more potatoes with the confidence of a man who had solved capitalism. Later, when the plates were scraped and the kids ran feral in the hallway, Claire stood at the sink, washing dishes while her mother dried water hissed over ceramic. The window above the sink reflected them both. A pair of women try not to look like they were. Try. Thank you for coming. Her mother said, concentrating too hard on a damp bowl and for setting a boundary. Claire blinked a boundary. I understand, her mother said, meeting her eyes in the window. We won't ask, Claire. Not at once. She handed over a plate. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was an understanding. Lay gently between them like a truce flag. No one dared name. She left before dessert was over on the porch. Her father followed her out with 2 mugs of coffee. Steam curdling like questions. He handed one on to her and didn't speak for a long time. The street was quiet. The thin trees lining it were losing their last leaves. I don't know how to be this person. He finally said, not looking at her. The one who needs Claire took a breath that felt like winter. It's a start that you can say it out loud. He nodded, still didn't look at her. You were right in the cafe. She didn't answer. He didn't apologize. It was too big for the porch, too small for this moment. But admission lived in the space between them. Warm as the coffee cooling in their hands, she left the empty mark on the rail and walked to her car without hugging him. It was the most honest holiday they had ever had. Advent December made the city look softer from her windows, as if fairy lights could sand the edges of steel. Invitations to galas collected in her inbox. She ignored most of them. Went to 2, left both before dessert. One night, a package arrived at her door with no return address. Inside was a shoebox full of photographs, the kind with scalloped edges and dates stamped in the corner. Clare is a baby asleep on her father's chest. Clare at 5, holding Elizabeth's hand with a stubborn pride. Clare at 8, one arm around Michael, the other around a lopsided snowman leaning toward collapse. At the bottom was a note in her mother's precise hand. I kept these. I thought you should have them. I'm sorry I didn't look at them more. She stood in the wash of her floor lamp and went through the whole box. Picture by picture. Carefully sliding it back into the envelope as if returning a fossil to its layer of earth. She put the envelope in a drawer with her passport and the deed to her penthouse. Not because she needed them, but because she didn't want to lose them again. Christmas Eve. They did not ask. She did not offer. Those were the terms. She drove to the rental house with a tin of cookies. Someone else's grandmother had baked and a brown paper parcel tied with string. The tree in the corner was slight and valiant, wearing too few ornaments. One of the kids had made a long chain of red and green paper loops that sagged in the middle like a smile. After a long day, they sang badly. The youngest fell asleep on Michael's lap. Elizabeth laughed at something small and true, and for a second, the woman who had once preened in tailored suits at family dinners looked like someone gentler, stripped of performance. After cocoa, Clare handed out her unassuming packages, not checks, not wires, gifts for her mother. A thick linen-bound notebook with her name embossed on the cover. Margaret a Martin Cancer and a pen that felt like a promise when you held it for the contracts you actually want. Her mother ran her thumb over the letters as if they might vanish. I do still want, she said, and cleared her throat. Thank you. For her father, a small box containing his old mechanical watch, the one that had stopped ticking years ago and lived in a desk drawer with a rubber band. Some paper clips. Clare had it repaired. The face was scratched, the hands purposeful. It keeps good time, she said. He swallowed. Turned it over. Like there might be writing he could read to make sense of this feeling. I always liked the weight of it, he said, as if talking to the watch. It reminded me to be careful. For Elizabeth, framed photographs from that box, the three of them on a summer lawn. These grassy tongues, blue with popsicle dye. So you remember there was a before, Clare said. Elizabeth's smiles, worked around words and found none. She set the frame down very carefully. I do, she said. I do. For Michael, a babysitter, not a person, not money, a schedule, an agreement with a trusted neighbor, and a rotating calendar of evenings twice a week, repaid for 3 months' time. She said, You owe me dinners where you stay seated. Michael laughed, a sound surprised as it was grateful. Do you? When she left, it was snowing lightly. She walked to her car without anyone asking. Are you sure? Could you? She drove home in a city that looked temporarily innocent and slept without waking at 3. New Year she spent it alone, by choice and by design. At 11:30 and Brooke, text from Elizabeth. Let her phone with a photo of the kids in paper crowns. Eye bags turned into confetti. Happy New Year! Elizabeth wrote. Thank you for showing up. Clare wrote back. Happy New Year! See you next week for dinner. I'll bring something green. She paused, added. Proud of you. Then deleted it. Typed. Proud of the kids. Deleted. That too. Settled on. Proud. We made it through. December sent. She poured 1 glass of champagne at midnight. Let it go flat on the coffee table. While the city hollered through the walls and went to bed with the reassurance that January would be mercifully plain. Birthdays. Her father's 70th birthday came in February. A quiet lunch at a diner with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that never stopped arriving. He wore the repaired watch. He kept glancing at it like it might jump off his wrist. "Do you miss the O.R.?" she asked, surprising herself. "Every day," he said, surprising them both. He cut his sandwich in half with a precision of habit. "I miss being certain. I miss being the person people waited for." "You can still be that person," she said. "Just in a smaller room." He looked up, held her eyes. "I'm learning how." After a beat, he added, "I'm sorry I didn't let you be yours." It wasn't an apology big enough to cover a decade, but it was real. The watch ticked between them, steady as a metronome. She paid the check with cash and left a tip. And left a tip large enough to be generous and small enough not to make a point. March. Brought Michael's birthday tacos at his cramped kitchen table. While the kids discussed planets with the urgency of little scientists mid-meal. He started to say, "Do you think you could?" He took a breath. Changed lanes. "Do you want more salsa?" "Yes," Claire says. And passed it like it was a baton in a race. They were finally running at the same speed. Elizabeth's in April. An afternoon walk around the lake where geese made unreasonable demands. And Elizabeth confessed she had joined a neighborhood legal clinic. "It's not glamorous," she said. "I forgot how much I like fixing problems that matter." Claire didn't say you never liked glamour. You liked the applause. She said, "Then do more of it." "I don't know if I can afford it." "You can't afford not to." Elizabeth huffed a laugh. "When did you become the older sister?" "When no one else was doing the job." They walked 2 more miles and talked about nothing and everything. The old minefields. It came in May in the form of an email from her parents. Short. Careful. Agonizingly. Neutral. "Love to have you for dinner Sunday." No agenda. Just dinner. She went. The house smelled like lemons and nervousness. There were plays, cards, other titles could keep order where intimacy might sail. They managed 40 minutes of the weather and neighborhood gossip before her father's face altered in that old way. Mouth tightening. Hands arranging themselves on the table like he needed something to hold. It was a look he wore before delivering a diagnosis. Her mother reached for his wrist without looking, as if she knew the impulse by muscle memory. "No," she said lightly to him in the room. "Not tonight." "Claire. Sit down." Her glass. The words were an instrument. She knew how to play. "If you are about to ask me for money," she said calmly, "don't." Her father exhaled. It was almost a laugh. Almost a sob. Understood. They ate the rest of the meal. Speaking of tomatoes and books and whether the new superintendent was a fool. It felt like rehearsing, being a family. Like practicing scales until your fingers learn the song. When she left, her mother walked her to the door and after an awkward beat, stepped forward and fixed the color of Claire's coat the way she had when Claire was 12 and headed for her first, the date. "There," her mother said, voice small. "That's better." Claire nodded. "See you next week." What remains? In June, one of Michael's children drew her a picture of a stick figure woman with a blue triangle coat and a gold frown underneath in black letters. Aunt Clare. She almost corrected the spelling. She didn't. She put it on her fridge, where the Wall Street Journal clipping had been, and told herself the paper had yellowed. Anyway. On a Tuesday afternoon in She didn't need the barista. Didn't recognize her. No one glanced up. She sat in the same corner for 10 minutes, not to rewrite the past, but to measure the distance she had walked. Since then, the holidays have been hallowed because they were built on air. These new days were not holidays at all. They were quieter, smaller. But they did not glitter. They held. Clare kept her boundary. No money, no loans, no bailouts. Dressed as gifts. And in the space where currency would have been, other things began to accumulate. Small jokes that survived a week. Texts about recipes and ridiculous neighbors. Books. Photographs. School projects. A repaired watch. Ticking. Respect. She realized was a currency, too. It accrued slowly with interest, when no one tried to spend it. And for the first time, she began to believe that this version of family practice over performance, nouns, over titles might be something she could keep.